Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalryan, and in today's video I want to talk a little bit about Assassination. I'm making a whole new row of videos talking about specific specs I'm super excited about, reasons why I'm excited about them, and maybe even giving you guys some reasons why you should be excited about these specific specs in the game. I've covered the Hunters with Marksman and Survival as the specs I want to play, and Rogue, of course. I'm covering a lot of Outlaw every time I get a chance, and I talked a bit about Subtlety. But the one spec of Rogue that I haven't really covered in detail is Assassination. Now, I do want to go over some specs that I will be very interested in playing once BFA comes out, and covering any new changes when it comes to certain specs as soon as they come out. But Assassination is one of those things that I feel like I need to cover, not only because I'm a Rogue main channel, but also Assassination has been a very popular spec in Legion. The specs stay true to its Rogue nature. While you did lose Gouge, for the most part you retained a lot of the abilities like Garrote and Cheap Shot, the Saps and the Bleeds, the Poisons that all the other specs of Rogues lost. All these things Assassination still retained, and carried with itself into Legion a powerful playstyle with good sustain and good burst damage, making it a very popular spec for a lot of PvE moments. So I want to cover Assassination in great detail today for BFA, just to give you guys some reasons why you might want to start leveling a Rogue in BFA if you haven't done one so far, and why you might want to play Assassination in the future. I think the best part about Assassination, and a lot of us that are Rogue players that can definitely agree, it's definitely a no-nonsense spec. I mean, the Assassination itself isn't the simplest, the easiest spec in the world, but compared to its other specs in the class field, it is very much no-nonsense. Outlaw, for example, my favorite spec. But even though it's my favorite spec, no matter how much I like it, no matter how much I support it, no matter how many videos I make about it, a lot of people still don't like the roll the bones mechanic. It is a mechanic with a little bit of RNG, something that is a buff to maintain and adjust and adapt, which some stuff I like, but a lot of people voiced their opinions when it comes to Rogue and said, we don't really want that. Assassination has more or less predictable damage, with some sprinkles of RNG here and there, especially for Legion, the Poison Bomb procs, but not to the point where it gets ridiculously annoying to keep up with the spec. If you do get nice buffs of RNG, it's only a damage increase, but even without the RNG procs, the spec still shines and has good damage. Combined with a few legendaries, it makes it a lot more powerful in the long run. It has a very balanced playstyle, very much predictable damage, which a lot of people feel comfortable with. Whatever abilities you throw down on the enemy, you don't have to have too much RNG to rely on their potency. And compared to Subtlety, Subtlety is not that much of a nonsense spec, but Subtlety doesn't have straightforward damage. For Sub, for example, you gotta maintain Nightblade. Nightblade on its own doesn't really hit that hard anymore, but what it does is provide you avenue to deal more damage to the enemy. So you maintain this buff for Nightblade, just simply so you can do more damage to the enemy, which makes you sometimes ask the question, should you maintain it at full 5 or 6 common points depending on your talents with deeper strat, or should you just simply drop it off at 3 common points because it's not as necessary, so you shouldn't really maintain it unless you have big boy burst ready. With Assassination you have a bunch of bleeds, and you know what they do? They deal good damage, so maintain them there at all times. Bleeds also give you more energy that you can use to deal more damage to the enemy, building common points, spending common points. So for Assassination, instead of having to have some roundabout playstyles of maintaining bleed so other abilities deal more damage, you simply just throw the nonsense out. You got dots, they deal damage. You got more dots, they also deal damage. Then when you don't need to refresh your dots, you don't need a buff to maintain, you just simply hit an enemy with even more envenom damage. More damage, stacked on that with a bit of more damage. It's just so simple and straightforward. I won't say it's an easy spec, but I definitely describe Assassination as a straightforward spec. A lot of people can get behind it, and a lot of people can understand it. Now the next part I want to talk about is Mastery and Poison Synergy in BFA. The Mastery itself changed for Assassination to include bleeds as well. So now your Mastery not only increases your poison damage, but also your bleed damage, which got a lot of people excited, as well as myself. I thought to myself that, wow, I can finally be like a fully bleed-based build of Assassination, or maybe some crazy poison-based bleed. And I thought to myself that I'm gonna have 2 different bleeds, one focusing on only poisons, the other focusing only on bleeds. But after playing it with BFA, I found out that yes, you can technically do that to get some kind of a bleed-heavy, poison-heavy build, but that's not really what it should come down to for you. It shouldn't be some kind of a discrimination for your build, like just, oh, I just want the green numbers, or I just want the dots that are all, the red bleeding dots. Instead, it should really be all about a mix of both. It's all about trying to find a nice balance between poisons and bleeds, as both of those mechanics, both of those dot-based mechanics, somewhat dot-based, do provide you different outlets and different avenues to deal with damage. For example, bleeds end up making really strong, good, direct AoE with your Crimson Tempest. But Assassination can have a lot of powerful dot damage too, just with an RNG chance of Poison Bomb. On top of it, Poison Bomb ends up being a decent ability that you can use during single target if it does proc, while on the other side the bleed of Crimson Tempest won't really be quite as useful in a pure single target situation. Also, besides abilities that either help out bleeds or poisons, you also have abilities that are simply all about physical damage. Maybe adding an execute mechanic to yourself so you can chip away at the enemy once they get below 30% of health, or simply buff the damage of your Fan of Knives. There's a lot of abilities that kind of just in between that allow you to customize your playstyle. So I feel like for Assassination, it's going to be kind of fun of trying to find out the balance of what you want. Where do you want poisons? Where do you want bleeds? How you want to use your poisons and how you want to use your bleeds? And when you can't make a decision between one and the other, you could hopefully find a middle ground between the two, where you're trying to find out maybe a physical ability that doesn't really contribute towards poisons to a certain extent, where you can have a poison heavy build, but also doesn't try to overreach into bleeds, where bleeds won't really be quite as effective. Something where both builds can help each other out. But at the same time, it also was able to be structured for BFA, where AoE abilities compete against AoE abilities. So poison AoEs compete against bleed AoEs, poison single target competes against bleed single target. So it's a lot of that synergy, and a lot of that like no nonsense continues on into the mastery and into the talent system. So I think it makes for a very interesting playstyle and different variations of playstyles that I think is going to make different kind of mechanics and different kind of builds that every single player can craft themselves depending on the situation, offering you a lot more flexibility as an Assassination Rogue in how you want to deal with various situations. The last part that I'm actually super excited, and this is going to be the nerdy side of Assassination, are the stats. Now, I won't be able to tell you exactly the best stats that you might want to stack in BFA. In Legion, we have a lot of the simulations, we have a lot of the theory crafting, and a lot of people trying out different pieces of gear against each other in order to see which stats end up doing most damage for you. Hell, right now bot programs can tell us exactly what we need, depending on our item level, depending on what pieces we have. But usually, mastery for the most amount of poison damage, and from there crit used to generate more common points for every mutilate and our Fan of Knives. Now, all these sound great, but then stats like haste and versatility start to fall behind. Versatility being pretty good as it buffs all aspects of your damage, and at one point it was the best stat because it buffed your bleeds, which were a lot more potent because you couldn't get enough mastery for poisons. But this late in the game, versatility just kind of falls behind, and then haste doesn't really have nearly as much of an impact, as Assassination doesn't really need to worry about energy, as you get a lot of your energy back from your bleeds anyway, so you have a reliable source of energy no matter what you do. But in BFA, they're changing up how stats work, and I feel like Assassination will be probably the best spec in terms of stats, with the most versatility for every single stat in the game. With your mastery changing towards the bleeds and poisons, it won't matter which one you have to stack. By stacking mastery, you support both bleeds as well as poisons when it comes to your damage output, AoE or single target, however you want to build yourself when it comes to PvE moments. Versatility ends up being a stat that currently is not too highly stacked right now, or at least it's really hard to get a high stacks of it on BFA beta, but it's a stat that still ups the damage of all your other abilities, be they physical abilities like Dispatch, for example, or your Fan of Knives buffs, talents that would rather add yourself a physical ability that doesn't benefit from your mastery. So stacking mastery is good. Stacking versatility can help out those talents that are more in the physical variety. Of course, crit has always been great, as crit still provides you extra common points per ability, which allows you to spend time mutilating less and dishing out your finishers like bleeds and poisons a lot more often, leaving you less downtime with building common points, more uptime, doing more damage to the boss. And finally, haste, which is the stat that's been kind of left in the back, kind of tracking along. They changed it up in BFA, where it actually affects your bleeds as well as poisons. And this is actually exciting, because Assassination gets its energy back from bleed ticks. So when you add extra haste to your stats, that means that one bleed within a certain amount of a lot of time, with the more haste you have, the more times it'll tick in the time that it is allotted. For example, let's say you have a bleed for 16 seconds, it ticks for 16 times. You get enough haste, it ticks for 17 times. Enough haste, 18 times. 19 times, 20 times, 25 times in a single 16-second stack. So this offers the opportunity to get more energy back, more energy to build your combo points, more combo points to spend your energy into as a resource into finishers for bleeds and or envenoms, which makes the spec feel a lot more smooth in playstyle. So this works for your bleeds as well as poison, so even poison dot ticks end up ticking a lot faster. Abilities that have ticks of poisons will have more ticks of them in a time allotted, depending on how much haste breakpoints you have. So ultimately you have a spec that has all stats in the game. All secondary stats cannot be bad stats, technically. Of course, you will have some stats that will be stronger. I'm thinking mastery, then versatility, then crit, and then haste behind. But haste, with how much value it has towards your bleeds and energy recovery, could actually be valued a lot higher. Overall, you have a spec that doesn't seem to have a wrong answer, which adds in more of that versatility to the specialization, which adds a lot more of that friendliness that a new player might find with a spec, and a lot easier to deal, I would think, when it comes to gearing in BFA. As this part is kind of nerdy, but for somebody who always tries to get the best in slot stats, and when you get a piece of gear that doesn't have the best stats that you need, it feels kind of bad because it feels like you're losing out on so much damage. You're losing out on your haste breakpoints, you're losing out, stat breakpoints, but for Assassination, it doesn't feel like a loss at any point. Every single new piece of gear you get is a benefit to you in one way or another, and that on its own is actually pretty exciting. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Those are the 3 things that I find super exciting about Assassination. This is more of a in-depth kind of more nerdy side of the video in terms of what I want out of a spec. But honestly, these are the things that I honestly value, and I think this is what makes the spec shine. I think we talked about all the exciting stuff with the bleeds and poisons and all this potential and the possibilities in PvP, which I could make a separate video on, and I think I will make a dueling video on Assassination very soon. I have some footage recorded, so hopefully you guys are excited for that. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on Assassination Rogue and BFA, and if any of these points can maybe made you consider the spec in the long run. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, if you guys enjoyed, go ahead and give this video a like. Subscribing to the channel is always appreciated, and hitting the notification bell is almost mandatory. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see all of you in another video.